The first rule was written on a card already waiting for me on the kitchen counter when I moved into the apartment. A thick off-white index card with my name spelled correctly in ink that looked like it had soaked too long into the paper. And it said, "If you hear the elevator bell after midnight, do not answer the door." Which would have been strange enough on its own, except that the elevator at the end of my hall didn't have a bell. Only a dull electronic chime that sounded like a microwave. And I remember standing there with the box cutter still in my hand, thinking this had to be a joke from the previous tenant, or maybe the landlord's idea of humor. But the apartment was otherwise spotless, empty, and quiet in a way that felt staged, like the silence had been arranged ahead of time. And the longer I stared at that card, the more I realized it hadn't been taped or placed casually. It had been centered on the counter, exactly between the sink and the stove, as if measured. As if the person who left it expected me to notice it before anything else, and I would have thrown it away right then if the second card hadn't been partially tucked under it, only the corner visible, forcing me to slide the first aside to read the next one, which said, "Always close the bedroom door before sleeping, even if you are alone." And then the third card under that said, "Do not look into the hallway mirror between 1:11 and 1:33 a.m. And by then, my stomach had tightened in that specific way it does when something is both ridiculous and specific enough to feel personal. Because anyone can write a spooky rule, but only someone who knows the place would pick those times. That mirror, that bell. And I told myself it was a viral thing, or a prank left by someone trying to scare the next renter. Except there were more cards, 7 in total, all written in the same ink, all in the same careful handwriting, none of them threatening, none of them explaining anything, just calm instructions like if you hear footsteps matching yours, stop and wait and do not answer questions you didn't hear asked. And the last one said, if a rule changes, you must follow the newest version, which I remember laughing at out loud because it sounded like the kind of ominous nonsense people add at the end of fake rules to make them feel deeper. And I laughed because laughter felt safer than admitting I was unsettled, and because nothing else in the apartment was wrong. The locks worked, the windows were sealed, the lights turned on, and when I stepped into the hallway, the mirror at the far end showed exactly what it should. A long beige corridor, and me holding a box with my own tired face reflected back. And for the rest of that first day, I went about unpacking and setting up and telling myself the cards were just flavor, atmosphere, something I'd forget about once real life settled in. Except that night, while I was brushing my teeth, I realized without thinking that I had closed the bedroom door before lying down, and I stood there with my hand still on the knob trying to remember when I'd done it, because I hadn't made a decision to do it. My body had just complied, and that should have been the moment I stopped dismissing everything as a prank. But instead, I shrugged it off, because people are good at normalizing small, weird things, especially when acknowledging them would mean accepting something much larger. And the first few days passed quietly enough that I almost convinced myself the rules were working, because nothing bad happened. No bells rang, no footsteps followed me, and the mirror remained just a mirror as long as I avoided it during those oddly specific minutes, which I did without really meaning to, because I found myself checking the time more often than usual, planning showers and late-night snacks around not being in the hallway then. And again, I told myself, this was just habit, just me indulging a silly superstition, and the building itself didn't help because it had that heavy padded silence older buildings get, where sound seems to sink into the walls instead of bouncing, and the neighbors were polite but distant, nodding hellos without stopping, like we'd all agreed not to linger. And the elevator's chime really did sound different at night, lower somehow, stretched, not a bell, but not the same sound as during the day either. And the first time I heard it after midnight, I was sitting on my couch with the lights off, phone glowing in my hands, when that sound drifted down the hall and stopped right outside my door, and I froze because I hadn't realized how much I'd internalized that first rule until my body reacted before my thoughts did. My breath caught, my muscles locked, and I sat there listening to nothing but the low hum of the fridge, waiting for a knock that didn't come. And after a minute, the elevator sound faded, and I exhaled and told myself, "See, nothing. The rules are pointless." And yet I didn't open the door to check. I just went to bed, closed the bedroom door, and slept with the light on. And it was around then that I started noticing the notes under my door. Not rules, just little slips of paper with times written on them, like 7:42 or 2:19, sometimes with a single word like soon or closer. And I would tell myself it was someone in the building messing with me, until I realized the handwriting matched the cards exactly, and that no one had any reason to know when I was home, when I slept, when I was awake, except that the times always corresponded to moments I remembered clearly. Times I'd been thinking about the rules, or standing in the hallway, or lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the building breathe. And the notes never told me to do anything. They just marked moments, like someone else was keeping track. And I should have reported it, should have gone to the landlord, should have told a friend. But the thing is, it didn't feel like harassment. It felt like documentation, like whatever was behind it was less interested in scaring me than in making sure I was paying attention. And the mirror rule was the one that got me closest to breaking, because there's something deeply human about wanting to look when you're told not to. And more than once, I found myself standing at the edge of the hallway at 1:10, watching the seconds tick by on my phone, telling myself I'd just glance, just prove it was nothing. And every time I backed out at the last second, because the idea of seeing something wrong in that mirror was worse than the frustration of not knowing. And I'm not saying there was never anything there, because there were nights I could swear the reflection lagged, just a fraction of a second slower than my movements. But I never caught it clearly enough to be sure, and that uncertainty was somehow worse, because it meant I couldn't prove anything, not to myself, not to anyone else. And life went on like that for weeks, a quiet standoff between me and a set of rules that hadn't been tested, until the night I heard footsteps matching mine, because I was walking back from the bathroom with the lights off, counting my steps the way people do when they're alone and bored. And after the 5th step, I heard another set, perfectly synchronized, heel to toe, exactly where they shouldn't have been. And I stopped without thinking, heart pounding, and the sound stopped too. And we stood there in that silence that felt stretched thin, like it might tear if either of us moved. And I waited, and nothing happened. And after what felt like a long time, but was probably only seconds, I took another step, and the sound didn't follow. And I told myself it was the building settling, pipes contracting, anything but what the rule implied. But I didn't finish the walk. I turned around and locked myself in my room. And that was the first night I dreamed of the hallway. Except it wasn't quite the same, because in the dream the mirror was closer, like the corridor had shortened, and my reflection was standing just a little too straight, watching me with my own eyes. And when I woke up, there was a new card on my nightstand, one I knew hadn't been there before, because I would have noticed it when I put my phone down. And it said, "If you wake and cannot move, keep your eyes closed until breathing returns to normal." And I sat there reading it, with my heart still racing, trying to remember if I'd been paralyzed, if I'd struggled to breathe. But the memory slid away when I tried to focus on it, like it didn't want to be held. And after that, the rules started to feel less like warnings and more like responses, like they were being updated based on something I was doing or something that was happening around me. And I realized with a cold clarity that the last rule, the one I'd laughed at, was the most important one, because it meant the rules were not fixed. They were alive in some way, adaptable, and that meant whatever they were protecting me from was also changing. And I tried to regain control by writing the rules down in my own notebook, copying them carefully, adding dates and notes, because writing things down makes them feel manageable. And for a while that helped, until I noticed that the wording on my notes didn't always match the cards anymore. That when I compared them, there were tiny differences. A word added here, a phrase softened there. And I told myself I must have copied them wrong. Except the changes always made the rules more specific, more tailored. Like, always close the bedroom door before sleeping, even if you are alone became, always close the bedroom door before sleeping, especially when you are alone. And do not look into the hallway mirror between 1:11 and 1:33 a.m. became, do not look into the hallway mirror between 1:11 and 1:33 a.m. unless you are certain it is empty. And that word, unless, sat in my chest like a stone, because it introduced choice, and choice meant responsibility. And responsibility meant that if something went wrong, it would be my fault for choosing incorrectly. And that was when the rule changed for the first time in a way I couldn't explain away, because I found a new card taped directly over the old one on the counter. Same handwriting, same ink, but different instruction. And the original wasn't gone. It was still there underneath, visible at the edges, like a previous version preserved for reference. And the new one said, "If you hear the elevator bell after midnight, do not answer the door unless it rings twice." And my skin prickled because there was no bell. There had never been a bell. And yet the rule was acting like there could be, like the situation it described was no longer hypothetical. And that night, just after midnight, I heard it. Not the chime, not the stretched sound I'd gotten used to, but a clear metallic ring. Once, echoing down the hallway, stopping right outside my door, and I sat there staring at the handle, my mind racing through the logic of the rule, telling myself this was just sound, just my brain filling in gaps. Except the second ring came, softer, closer, like it was right on the other side of the wood. And I remember standing up before I'd decided to, my hand hovering inches from the handle, and the overwhelming sense that whatever was out there knew the rules better than I did, knew exactly how to position itself within them. And I don't know how long I stood there before the sound faded, but I didn't open the door. And the next morning there was another note under it, just one word this time: late. And after that, the rules accelerated, changing more often, becoming longer, more conditional, more demanding. Like if you see someone in the mirror who does not move when you do back away slowly and apologize. And apologies must be sincere. And I found myself practicing apologies under my breath, just in case, because the idea of getting it wrong felt worse than the idea of doing it at all. And my friends noticed I was distracted, tired, but I couldn't tell them why. Because how do you explain a set of rules that only make sense if you've already accepted them? And the building itself started to feel like it was paying attention, lights flickering when I thought about breaking a rule, the elevator stopping on my floor even when I hadn't pressed the button, doors down the hall opening and closing softly as I passed, like a ripple. And through all of it, I kept following the rules, because following them seemed to keep things stable, seemed to maintain a fragile balance. And I told myself that as long as I complied, nothing truly bad would happen. And maybe that was true, until the night I found a card I hadn't seen before, taped to the inside of my bedroom door at eye level, which meant someone would have had to open it to put it there. And it said, "If you hear your name called from inside the apartment, do not answer unless you are certain you are alone." And I read it again and again, stuck on that last part. Because how could I ever be certain of that? Not anymore. And as if to prove the point, I heard it. My name, spoken softly from the living room in my own voice, and every instinct screamed at me to respond, to assert myself, to say I'm here. But the rule was clear, and I stood there with my mouth open, forcing myself to stay silent, and the voice repeated my name, closer this time, disappointed. And then it stopped, and I sank onto the bed, shaking. And in the quiet that followed, I realized something I hadn't let myself think before, which was that the rules were not just protective, they were instructional. They were teaching something how to interact with me safely, how to navigate my space without crossing a line. And that meant I wasn't just being protected from it, it was being protected from me too. And that understanding shifted everything, because it meant the balance depended on both of us following the rules, and the moment one side failed, the other would have to adapt. And that's when the final change happened, the one I can't stop thinking about, because I woke up one morning to find my notebook open on the counter, a new rule written in my handwriting, but not by me. The letters slightly off, like someone had learned to mimic them by watching. And it said, "If a rule changes, you must follow the newest version even if you don't remember agreeing to it." And underneath that, written more heavily, was a date and time in the future, tonight. And I stood there staring at it, understanding in a way I hadn't before that the rules were no longer just being updated around me. They were being updated through me, that something had learned enough to start participating directly, and that meant the line between follower and author had blurred. And all day I felt watched, not in a threatening way, but in a patient one, like something waiting to see if I would comply. And when night came, I followed the rules as I always had, closed the door, avoided the mirror, stayed silent when sounds drifted through the apartment, and nothing happened. No bells, no voices, no footsteps. And for the first time in months, I felt almost normal, almost relieved, until I noticed a new card on the counter as I went to get a glass of water, placed carefully in the center, and it said, "If you feel safe, you are being remembered." And I don't know exactly what that means, not fully, but I know this. The rules haven't stopped changing. They're just changing more slowly now, subtly, like they're settling into something permanent. And I still follow them, because following them has become part of who I am. And because every so often, when the apartment is quiet and the hallway mirror is dark, I catch the faintest sense that something is listening, not to trap me, not to hurt me, but to learn. And I can't shake the feeling that one day I'll read a rule I don't recognize at all, written in a hand that is almost mine. And I'll know without being told that it's meant for someone else, someone who will move in after me, someone who will find the cards and laugh and tell themselves it's just a prank, and that whatever has been watching me will be ready, because it remembers how well I followed the rules until one of them changed. I thought that would be the end of it, that sense of being remembered lingering like an afterimage, but the days that followed felt thinner somehow, as if the apartment had lost a layer I hadn't known was there, and I kept noticing small inconsistencies that didn't fit any rule I had written down, like the way the clock in the kitchen would pause for exactly 1 second at 1:17 a.m. every night before resuming, or how the hallway mirror no longer reflected the light switch behind me unless the lights were already on. And these weren't violations so much as adjustments, the kind you only notice when you've been watching too closely for too long. And I started to wonder if this was what it meant to be remembered, not watched constantly, but accounted for, built into the system the way a frequently used shortcut becomes permanent. And that idea should have been comforting, except it came with the creeping realization that if I was accounted for, I could also be replaced. And that thought settled in my chest and stayed there, heavy and unmoving. And one evening I came home to find my notebook gone from the counter, not missing exactly, just relocated, sitting open on the coffee table as if it had always belonged there. And the last page was filled, not with new rules, but with observations written in that same, almost my handwriting. Notes like, responds well to silence, and avoids mirror without prompting, and learns patterns quickly. And reading them felt like reading a performance review of my own life, detached and clinical. And I realized then that the rules had never been the point. Not really. They were just a framework, a way to measure compliance, to see how I would react to structure, to ambiguity, to change. And that the true test had been ongoing, subtle, woven into the mundane moments I hadn't thought to question. And I sat there for a long time with the notebook on my lap, listening to the building's quiet, wondering if there was a rule I could write that would give me back some control, some clarity. But every sentence I thought of felt inadequate, either too vague or too aggressive, and I was afraid of what might happen if I tried to assert authorship outright. Because the one thing I understood now was that the rules functioned best when they felt inevitable, when they aligned just closely enough with common sense that following them felt like a choice I was making freely. And that night, for the first time, I broke a rule on purpose, a small one, insignificant on paper, because at 1:22 a.m. I walked into the hallway and stood directly in front of the mirror, heart hammering, telling myself I would just stand there, not look closely, not search for anything wrong, just exist in that space during forbidden minutes. And at first, nothing happened. My reflection stood where it should, matching me perfectly. And a rush of relief flooded through me, followed immediately by disappointment, because part of me had wanted proof, had wanted something dramatic to justify the fear I'd been living with. And as I turned to leave, I caught it. Not a monster or a distortion, just the smallest delay. My reflection still facing forward while my body had already begun to turn. And in that fraction of a second, I understood that the rule hadn't been about what I would see. It had been about what would see me. And the mirror felt less like a surface and more like an aperture, something that had learned the shape of me through repetition. And I stepped away slowly, not running, not apologizing, because no rule had told me to. And the rest of the night passed without incident. But in the morning, there was a new card waiting, placed neatly beside the others. And it said, "If you test a boundary, expect it to be reinforced." And the mirror rule was gone, not removed, but replaced entirely with one that said, "The hallway mirror is now permitted at all times, provided you do not expect it to behave as you do." And I laughed then, a short, brittle sound, because the rule had changed in response to me, not to protect me, but to accommodate what I'd done. And that was when the final understanding settled in, slow and undeniable, that this place was not trying to trap me or torment me. It was refining an interaction, iterating towards something stable, something sustainable. And I was part of that process, a variable that had proven useful. And the reason I'm writing this now, the reason I'm setting it down as carefully and honestly as I can, is because yesterday I found a moving notice taped to my door, neatly printed. No, sender listed, informing me that my lease would not be renewed and that arrangements had already been made for my relocation. And I didn't feel panic when I read it, just a quiet acceptance, because I'd known on some level that this couldn't be permanent, that once the rules were sufficiently refined, they wouldn't need me anymore. And last night, as I packed my things, I noticed the cards on the counter had been reordered, streamlined, fewer than before, cleaner. And the final one, written in that careful handwriting, said, "If the resident departs, leave the rules where they can be found." And I did. I left them exactly as they were, centered on the counter, because following the rules felt like the only way to say goodbye. And as I closed the door for the last time, I had the strange, unsettling certainty that somewhere, something was noting my absence, adjusting, preparing, not with malice, but with interest. And I can't shake the feeling that even now, wherever I go next, I'm being compared to the next person who will stand in that kitchen, read those cards, and decide whether or not to follow the rules until one of them changes.